In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the overloaded method signatures of JOptionPane.showInputDialog. In a previous video, we used a very simple signature where we can allow the user to enter free text. The problem with free text is that we don't have a whole lot of control over what the user enters. So here, where we just have an open field, the user can enter anything, we're going to parse that into a number. If it's not really a number that the user enters, it could crash our program. So I could say enter gallons of gas, 50, and what we'll see is a big, ugly message that comes up that says number format exception. So what we prefer to do is give the user a predefined list of values. This video is going to be a prerequisite to the next video I'm going to do, where we're going to simulate making a truck so that we can show the use of if tests. So what I'm going to do is make a JOptionPane that allows us to choose regular cab, super cab, or super crew. Now I'm going to start by adding a new main class to our existing vehicles project. I'll do this quickly because we've done it before. We're going to call it create a truck, and I'm going to choose finish. And we'll simply give it a public static void main method, PSVM, and then tab, and NetBeans will give us that public static void main. And then I'm going to create a new method called prompt user. Okay, because we know we don't like to keep the main method very heavy. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to use, well, actually I'll tell you what, we'll click right here, and I'm going to say create method prompt user, and there we go. Okay, remove this line. And now what I'm going to do, let me double click so we can see this in high definition. Now, you might remember in a previous video we saw a string array that resulted when we parsed a file based on a delimiter. The string array, if you remember, it will store multiple strings, and it kind of stores them on different floors. So floor number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you wish. We're going to do a similar thing here. I'm going to say string. And what are we going to call this? We're going to call this cab. So we're going to say string cab equals new string. Now, a couple things I need to do. I need to use square brackets on the left side to indicate that this is going to be an array. In other words, a collection of multiple strings. And then I need square brackets on the right side as well, again, to say it's going to be an array. But the difference is I have to put a number on the right side to say how many strings I want to store into this array. Remember, array can store multiple string variables, multiple string values. Okay, now that I've done that, I can address each of these one by one. And remember that we start counting with 0. So I'll say cab 0 equals, and then what's our first option? We have regular, super cab, and then super crew. So we'll say first one is regular. Okay, and then second one, cab 1. Remember, we start counting with 0. Super cab. Okay, and terminate with a semicolon, and then cab 2 equals, and then super crew. I should note that that's a trademark of Ford, so we can maybe make it something slightly different, but nonetheless, you get the idea. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to prompt the user with our old friend JOptionPane. We have to be very careful of this syntax because we know that it is case sensitive. And I'm going to say, so notice capital J, capital O, capital P, everything else lowercase. Now take a look as I start typing showInputDialog. Do you see how a bunch of method signatures appear here? Okay, and that means it is overloaded. So that means we can call a specific method, or really a specific variant of the showInputDialog method, based on the parameters that we pass. So far we've been using this method where my mouse is, where we just put in a message. But what we want to do is we want to use this signature instead. There's quite a bit more here. You see in the existing one, the one we've been using so far in our vehicles class, we have simply passed in a string, and the string represents whatever we're showing to the user. Now, in the one we're using in this video, we need a parent component. In our case, this is going to be null. And the reason is we're running on command line, not in a traditional swing environment. If that doesn't make sense, don't worry too much about it. The message is the title we're going to show to the user. I'm sorry, that's going to be the message the user is going to see. A title for the box, message type, icon, selection values, and then initial selection value. So quite a few more things we're going to need to specify here. Okay, so showInputDialog, and we'll start with parent component. We'll say null. Okay, after parent component, we have the message we want to display, which we'll just say choose a cab type, and then the title, we'll just say cab selection. Okay. Next we have a 0. Now gosh, I don't remember what the documentation showed when I typed in showInputDialog. So what I've done is I've searched, I just did a Google search for JOptionPane.showInputDialog, and it took me to the documentation here, and I can see that signature once again. We see parent component, which is null, the message we're showing, the title. Oh, the message type. Okay, well let's click and see what a message type can be. Message type, the type of message to be displayed, error, information, warning, question, or plain. Now you notice that this is all uppercase, separated by an underscore. That typically means that this is a constant, okay? Another thing, message type, that's going to determine what this box looks like. It's going to, if you've ever seen a message box that has maybe a red exclamation that means a warning or an error, and information is typically an I within a yellow circle, and then a question would be kind of like a white question mark within a blue background, something like that. Well, we're asking the user for information here, so the correct thing we want to say is question message. Let's take a look while we're on this documentation and see if we can find some more information about this question message. There we go. Question message is a constant that is defined within the class JOptionPane. That might seem a little bit tricky, but let me show you how we're going to do it. We're simply going to say, instead of 0, JOptionPane.question. Do you see how it starts auto-completing for me when I start typing? Question message. So, a little bit confusing, but that's basically saying I want this to prompt the user for some information. Okay, next we have an icon. Let's leave that as null for the moment. Next, we have the options we want to give to the user, and that is here our string cab. Next, we have what's the default option we want to give the user. Let's say regular. Okay, and then we'll terminate with a semicolon, and we see once we do that, the red line goes away, and it looks like we're in pretty good shape. So let me right-click on this, because remember what's going to happen here when we call showInputDialog. Let me go back to the documentation and search for showInputDialog. And what you're going to see, look closely at this method signature. It's a static method. We now know what static is. That means we do not have to declare an object of type JOptionPane before we invoke this method. We can invoke it on the class itself. Okay. What's important, though, is you see it's returning a string. So we have to save that return string into a variable. Okay, don't forget to do that. It's very easy to forget that part. We can either do it ourselves. We can say string selected cab equals. We can do that. Alternatively, we can let NetBeans help us out here. We can say refactor, and then we can say introduce, and then variable. Okay. And I'll go ahead and choose enter. Okay, what's the name we're going to call it? Selected cab, and enter. Okay, so it did a little bit of extra stuff there. It declared it final, which we're not too worried. Don't worry about that. We can keep that or remove it. It also made it an object, but no worries. We can get a string out of an object pretty easily. So what I'm going to do after I show this prompt is system out println SOUT tab, and then I'm going to say selected space cab in quotes, so that's a string literal, and then we'll say plus selected cab. So we just want to see what the user selected from this list. Okay, let's save and let's play and let's see what we get. Oops, wrong one, sorry. Let me one moment. For this one, I'm going to right-click on Create a Truck. I'm going to say Run File because I want to tell it to run this Create a Truck. Now take a look. Choose a cab type, Regular, Super Cab, Super Crew. Do you see how that comes up in a drop-down instead of just being plain text? Now let me go ahead and choose Super Cab and choose OK. and take a look at the output that we got. Selected cab, super cab. If I run this one more time, this time let's say super crew, and okay. Okay, and you see this time it said selected cab super crew. Now a few other things I want to do here. First of all, the system out print line, honestly, don't overuse this. That gets into a bad habit to do system out print line. We're going to use a different JOptionPane method to handle that. But we'll do that in just a moment. First of all, I want to change the default selection. Let's change it to super crew. If you noticed before, it defaulted to regular, but now I'm typing in super crew, and now I'm going to go ahead and run one more time, and let's see if it selects super crew by default. So I right click and I choose run, and notice this time super crew is the default. I can still change it to something else. I'm just saying which one do I want to show as the default selection. And there we go. I change it to regular, and sure enough, selected cab regular. Okay, next item. It is considered bad practice to have string literals like this, especially if we're repeating them, because we might forget. We might capitalize the C. We might make it super space crew. Super space crew is not the same thing as super crew without a space. In Java, spaces are important, and also spaces are important, capitalization is important. So you see, in this case, regular came up as the default because it doesn't know what super space crew is. Super space crew is not the same as super crew. Okay, let's figure out a way to make our lives a little bit easier. Go ahead and choose OK there. What we will do in this case is we will define a constant. So a constant is much better than a string literal. Let me go ahead and take super crew back to how it was. Now, up here where it says super crew, I'm going to say refactor, and I'm going to say introduce, and I'm going to say constant. Note the shortcut there, Alt-Shift-C, will do the same thing. Remember that because we're going to use Alt-Shift-C in just a moment. So this one, I want to make a constant for super crew. I'll go ahead and choose that. Notice that it capitalizes this, and notice there's an option to replace all occurrences. Watch what happens when I choose OK. It's going to replace this one on line 23, and it's going to replace this one on line 25 as well. And there we go. Do you notice it's all uppercase? All uppercase is the syntax we use for a constant. Where have we seen that before? Question message. Remember that? I said that's a constant, all uppercase. Words are separated by an underscore. Okay, let's practice. Super cab, Shift-Alt-C. Whoops. I did Shift-Control-C, meant Shift-Alt-C. So Shift-Alt-C, we're going to go ahead. Okay, yep, that's fine, and okay. And one more time, regular, Shift-Alt-C, regular, and there we go. Okay, now you see what it's done is it's defined these constants down below, so we only have the string literal defined in one place, but we can refer to it in multiple places. Okay, so I'll make this super cab now, like so. You see, in this case, it's all uppercase and it's in green, which indicates it is a constant. A nice thing about constants is you can right-click and you can do a reference check. You can say find usages. And what this will do is it will look for anywhere this constant is used. You see here it shows me line 22 and line 25. You might say, well, gosh, that doesn't seem like a whole lot of value because I could just do a Control F and I could search on a string, right? Super cab, like so. I can search like that. So why do I need to make a constant to be able to find usages? Well, the advantage of this find usages is it will look not only in the current class, but any other class that's part of this project, even compiled classes. You cannot search for a string in compiled classes. Find usages is also a lot more efficient because it's using this constant reference instead of actually parsing through a whole big Java file looking for a specific string. So it's always a good idea to use constants instead of string literals. We might also want to refact this title and this message into a constant, but to be honest, What we really want to think about is using some internationalization features so that we can provide translations of this in another language. Let's hold that thought for a later video. Okay, so what I want to do now is replace the system out print line with another type of JOptionPane where we can see some output and we don't always have to go and look at that console output, which is very easy to miss. For this, I'm going to use JOptionPane again, but I'm going to use a different method. I'm going to use one called showMessage, and this simply pops up a message to us. You see, once again, we have three overloaded signatures. Component, parent component. That doesn't matter for us when we're running in command line mode when we are now, so we can simply leave that null. Object message, and then we also have a string title and an int message type, just as we've seen before in JOptionPane.showInputDialog. Let's go with the simplest one right now. Let's go with parent component and object message. And for parent component, we'll just say null. And then for the message, we're going to say this message that we were previously printing out to the console. Okay. System out print lines, generally I don't recommend using those excessively. They tend to get messy, hard to find. This is a better way to prompt the user for some information. So you see what we're doing is we're collecting some information from the user, and then we're showing the user a confirmation of what the user has selected. So let's run this program one more time. I'm going to go ahead and save. Okay. I'm going to right click on create a truck and I'm going to say run. And now let's look at this in slow motion. Do you see cab selection up at the top? Let me scroll down. Cab selection, there's our title. Okay. Now do you see choose a cab type? There's our message, choose a cab type. Do you see the little question mark? There we go, JOptionPane.questionMessage. You see that gives us the question mark as opposed to maybe an information or an exclamation. Information would be an I, exclamation would be a warning or an error. Cab, that is our string array with these three options. And then supercab is the default selection. So you see this JOptionPane.showInputDialog with a predefined list is showing exactly as we wish to present it. Let's go ahead and choose supercrew, and then I'm going to choose OK. And now take a look. We have an information message, selected cab, supercrew. You see how it pops up in a message like this instead of appearing down here in the console where the user is not likely to see it. Choose OK, and then we're good. Now, one footnote on that, in introductory programming, as we have right now, this is just fine to show a prompt with a pop-up and then show a confirmation with a pop-up. But in general, pop-ups that require a user action, like clicking a button, those are considered things to use only sparingly in current user experience thought. If you think of a mobile phone application, you don't want to have to be able to you don't want to have to tap on it all the time. You don't want to get a whole bunch of notifications because, quite frankly, they're annoying. And a lot of times when you're using a mobile app, you are frankly multitasking, which you probably shouldn't be doing, but let's face it, a lot of people do. So for mobile apps, instead of showing a confirmation where you have to actually click OK to dismiss it, a lot of times we'll do something more subtle, like maybe vibrate the phone, or maybe change the screen color, or change a pattern on the screen to make sure that colorblind people can see it as well. Some kind of feedback like that. Again, in this class, this is just fine, but when we get to mobile design or user experience, we don't want to be obsessive about showing too many messages. So, a couple different overloaded methods of JOptionPane. Note that we're not saving what gets returned from showMessageDialog because, frankly, nothing gets returned from showMessageDialog. You see it returns a void. Nothing gets returned from it. So we're not saving any output from that, where we are saving output from the user selection. But these are a couple of different methods that are going to serve us well when we talk about if tests, which is our next subject. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.